Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to work on the body controls now. So in a previous video we created these clusters just here. Let me see if I can grab that. Let me just turn off my joints there. So you can see we've got this little cluster here and this cluster here. So torso cluster and a pelvis cluster, and that basically allows us to move the body around. So what I want to do now is create basically a control handle for that cluster and for the one at the bottom here. So one that's going to kind of run the upper torso plus the shoulders, okay, and then one at the bottom here which is going to run the pelvis including the hips, and then an overall handle which is going to allow us to grab the entire body and kind of move all of that around. And we'll also probably have a mid-torso control as well, just to allow us a little bit more control over the sort of the middle here, middle area just here. So as we've done previously, I'm going to grab another circle curve, and this one I'm going to make very, very big like this. And what I want to do is use this curve and I'm going to snap it to the pelvis. So with the move tool active, I'm just going to use snap to points and I'm going to drag that up to the pelvis area like that. Now with this particular one, what I'm going to do is scale this down a little bit so it's just inside the handles like this, and then what I want to do is duplicate it and scale it up so it's quite big like this, so it's outside the handles like that. Then I'm going to duplicate it again, and I'm going to bring this one and point snap it up to my final spine joint up here. Okay, and I want to freeze those transformations, so I'm just going to select those three handles, go to modify freeze transformations, and then what I'm going to do is modify the shapes. So with this particular curve at the top here, I'm going to hit component mode, and I'm going to grab the two back control vertices here and bring those down, and then I'm going to grab the two on either side and bring those up. So it sort of forms a band over the top of the shoulders here. Okay, so this is really going to kind of signify that it's going to be controlling the upper torso. Now you can grab these and kind of, you know, squeeze them in a little bit if you need to. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what shape you create here, just as long as it's sort of indicative of controlling sort of that upper body section like that. So we can just kind of adjust it like that, however we see fit. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the hip control down here. So that's going to be this one just here. That's the inner of the two circles. So once again, I'm going to pop up to component mode, and I'm going to adjust the positions of these control points. So this one here, I'm going to bring the middle ones up at the front, and I'm going to grab the two outside ones and bring those down a little bit, and maybe just kind of squeeze them in a bit more. Maybe grab these ones and scale them out a little like that, and maybe up that way a bit. Oops, and maybe bring these in a little bit. Okay, once again, it doesn't really matter what you do with these. It's kind of up to you. You can adjust it to kind of suit whatever your character is. Okay, so it's something along those lines. Okay. So at this point, I'm just going to name these. So this one's going to be torso lower, and I want to delete the history as well on these. Some of them still have some history, so I'm going to go edit, delete by type, history. There we go. So I'm going to call this one torso, and this is sort of matching the cluster that I've got. I'll pop open the outliner here, so you can see here I've got torso cluster and pelvis cluster. So I'm going to basically name these pretty much a similar thing. So this one's torso control. Okay, and this one down here is going to be pelvis control. Okay, and what I'm going to do is parent their respective clusters to them. So I'm going to hold down, or I'm going to select the, let's see, the torso control, just here, the torso cluster, I should say. I'll shift click the torso control we've just created, and I'll go to edit parent, like that. I'll do the same thing with the pelvis control. So we'll grab pelvis cluster, shift select the pelvis control, and parent that by hitting P or going to edit parent. Okay, so now when I grab this handle, you can see there it also activates the cluster, and I can move that around. Okay, I can also rotate it if I need to as well. Same thing should occur down here, so I can rotate that around, and I can also use the move tool and move that around as well. Now you'll notice when I do that, that this pelvis joint doesn't actually do anything. Okay, the pelvis joint doesn't move at all, this one here. And that's because currently it's not connected to anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a parent constraint on the pelvis joint and connect it onto this control curve as well. Now the reason I'm using a parent constraint and not just parenting it is that with a parent constraint, it doesn't stop you then parenting this joint onto another joint, if that was something we needed to do. When you parent joints, they form these connections. Okay, when you do a parent constraint, it doesn't form one of these little triangular connections. So it's sort of similar outcome, but two different methods of doing it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select the pelvis control. I'm going to shift select the pelvis joint, and then I'm going to go to constrain, parent constraint, and I'm just going to make sure that I've got maintain offset as active, and I'm going to constrain all translate and all rotate. So we'll add that in. Okay, so now when I select this control handle and I move it, you can see that the pelvis goes with it. Okay, now currently, because I've got these control handles controlling the hips, okay, they're not connected to the hip control or the pelvis control. So what I need to do is take those curves, those two controllers, and parent them to the pelvis control. So I'll select the two hip controls, shift select the pelvis control, and hit P to parent it. So now all of that's going to move together, but if I need to, I can individually select the hips and move those separately, like that. Now I also need something that's going to control the entire body. You can see at the moment I can move the lower body and I can move the upper body, but I can't move both. So that's what this main control handle here is going to be for. Now before I do that, I'm going to connect the shoulders controls to the torso control, and that's basically the same setup as the hips and the pelvis control. So I'm going to select my two shoulder controls, shift select my torso control here in the middle, and I'm going to hit edit parent, or P on the keyboard. So now I can move the upper body, and you can see the shoulders go with it, like that. Or I can use the shoulder controls themselves to position those. Okay. So then what we want to do is grab the main control handle here for the body, and I'm going to rename this body control. And I need to parent my torso control and my pelvis control onto the body, just here. So shift select both of those torso controls, torso and pelvis, and then parent it onto the body control, like that. So now I can select this one and move the whole thing, like that. Or I can select just the hip and move that. Or I could select just the top torso section and move that. Okay, or the individual shoulders and hips if I need to. And once again, those are just for fine control, just adjustment positions. Okay. So that's the basic body control setup. And what I'll do now is create a control pretty much for everything. We haven't done any head control yet, but I'll do one of those in a separate video. What we'll do here at the moment is actually connect up sort of everything we've got so far to a main controller. So I'm going to just create a massive circle curve, the middle of the grid, just nice and big, something like this, and make sure it's centered. Now keep in mind I'm centering this, but that also kind of needs your character to have already been centered. That's something that should have already been done when it was modeled, so that basically its feet were on either side of the grid. Okay, so this one here is going to be called the master control, and normally what I'll do is put all of that into capitals just so it stands out. Okay, and we need to make sure that it's centered in the grid. That way all of its transformations are all zeroed out, and we want to get rid of the history, so edit, delete by type history. Okay, so this is the master control. Now I'm just going to collapse all of these things in the outliner here. You can see here I keep getting this transformation node here on my root joint, and I don't know for the life of me why that keeps popping up. It's a bit of a weird one, really. I'm not too sure why. Normally that wouldn't be there. Now I've got this mesh group here, and that's basically just all of my models sort of within these groups that I had just as a bit of a proportion type setup. So you guys can ignore this mesh group. Okay, that's not really sort of that's not really needed. All right, so a couple of things first that I want to sort of hide here, or kind of just point out. We've got the spine IK, okay, that's the spine IK handle, and we've got the spine IK curve. We actually don't need to do anything to those. They basically just need to sit sort of in here. So what I'm going to do is select them both and group them by going edit group. Okay, and that's going to pop them into this group here, like that. And I'm just going to rename this. I'm just going to call this, let's just call this rig. I want something that's going to basically suggest not to touch this. So let's just call this rig locked. Okay, so don't, so basically don't touch this, in other words. You could also call this do not touch. All right. Okay. So what we want to do basically is start connecting our controllers onto the master control handle. Okay, so I've got the body control. So when I move the main control handle, I want the body to go with it. So what I can do is middle mouse drag the body control down to the master control, like that. That's going to drop it in underneath, like that. Okay, so now when I grab the body control and I move it around, also in the master control, you can see the body goes with it. Now at the moment it's leaving the feet behind and the arms behind. So what I want to do is grab the wrist control, both of those, and I want to middle mouse drag those down onto the master control as well. So you can see now I've got master control, and inside that I've got the body control, the left wrist and the right wrist. So now when I move the master, the two arms go with the object as well. And we need to do the same thing for the feet. So let's grab both of the foot controls. So I'm just going to hold control and click both of those in the outliner, and we'll middle mouse drag those down to the master control. Okay. So when I grab the master control, I can move everything around like that. You can see the whole rig goes now. Now, you'll also notice that I've got the left wrist IK is out here as well. Okay, I've got those two wrist IKs. Okay. Now, because we didn't group those in the same way that we did the grouping with the IK and the legs, they've actually just kind of remained out here. Possibly what we could do with those is just drop both of those into our rig locked folder or group. So they're in there with those. Okay, so you can see there I can still move everything around and it's okay. The reason that that's the case is that even though we're kind of putting them into this rig locked group, we can do that because the animators will never actually select those IK handles. Those IK handles are actually being moved around with the, or by the arm controls, the wrists and the elbows and so on. So we don't actually need to be able to access them. So that's why we can put them in this group. Okay, so then we've basically got, the root joint just here. Okay, and that's basically all of our skeleton. Okay, now at the moment, none of that's actually kind of connected in anywhere. The skeleton basically just follows along with all the IK and all the handles. So when we move this around, it's basically just moving the handles, but nothing else. And at the moment, the problem here is that we can't really scale this properly. You can see that the handles scale, but the skeleton doesn't really scale properly. Okay, and it kind of all squishes in. So sometimes it's nice to be able to scale the object or scale the whole character up and down. So what we need to do is work out a system for that. I'm just going to save this here for a second. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a scaling system for the rig. So what I want to do first of all is I basically want the skeleton to scale with the master control. Okay, all the handles will scale with it automatically because they're all parented to it, but the skeleton isn't. And you can see here the skeleton is not actually being controlled as far as its scale by anything. So what I'm going to do first of all is come across and grab the root joint. That might also be named pelvis joint or base joint, something like that. And I'm going to group it. So we'll just hit Control G, and that's going to create a group for that. Now at the moment, I've got this weird transform group here that I mentioned just before. I'm going to attempt to actually remove this group from the transform by hitting Shift P, and you can see that that's kind of popped out of there now. I've been trying this previously and it keeps jumping back in, or it disconnects it, but then it creates another one. So you should be finding that there's no transform group on your pelvis joint. It should just say pelvis joint. All right, so I'm going to rename this one, and I'm going to call this scale group. Okay, and inside that you'll find the skeleton. Okay, there's the root joint. So what I want to do now is take the master control handle. I'm going to control click the scale group in the outliner, and then I'm going to come up to constrain scale, and I'm just going to pop into options, and I just want to set maintain offset. Okay, and I just want to have all axes constrained, and I'll hit add. So now what I've got on my scale group is the scale is being controlled by this handle. So if I take the handle and I scale it down, you can see the entire rig scales down without it twisting up. And that's what's going to allow us to scale our character if we find, for example, that the character comes into our scene a bit too big. But also, that's what would allow us to do like scaling effects on a character. Let's say our character is like Ant-Man or something, we could actually scale the rig up like that as well, if he grows or if he shrinks. Okay, so that's basically all the body controls that we need. So I'll leave this here, and really all we need to do is maybe a head control, and then we can look at binding our characters. So I'm going to leave this video here, and I'll see you in the next one.